As I mentioned, David Rehimi here, SFU alum. Thank you for reminding me, Azam, that it's been over 10 years now since I've graduated. Very shocking thought. I was surprised when my high school graduation 10-year anniversary happened, but university, that really makes you feel old. But no, it's been great. I obviously owe a lot of my sort of adult career and adult life to some of the relationships and things that I learned at SFU. And so always happy to give back. SFU is a current client of ChargePoints now as well. So I'm often on campus. I was also always very supportive of the various sports programs, football team, basketball team. So I'll always like to keep in touch with SFU, especially after, the school gave me so much and really sort of helped me pave my way in a lot of ways in terms of my career. So happy to be on. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I did put some slides together just to kind of cover off my own career, but then also to talk a bit about my experiences at SFU. So I'll go through some of these slides here. I think you should be seeing them. Feel free to interrupt or stop me if there's any issues with what you see here, but yeah, I'll go over, I'll talk a bit about my university experience, a bit about my career path, and then we'll get into talking a bit about EV charging and then ChargePoint and the sort of sustainable realm and sustainability industry in general, which I'm happy to talk about and take any questions. But and there is the chat function in Zoom. So if throughout this presentation you guys have any questions or want to interrupt me or anything like that, just put them in the chat, and then if I'm able to get to them, I'll get to them. Otherwise, we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. But please, yeah, feel free to ask any questions you have. A lot of people are always interested in this kind of stuff, and it raises lots of questions. So let's do that. But first, I'll talk a bit about my background. So as I mentioned, graduated from SFU just over 10 years ago now. It was a major in communications with a minor in econ. My university experience was pretty great. I live here in Port Coquitlam. I grew up in Poco, so I'm a local guy and I had a lot of friends at SFU. And I kept really busy while I was at school as well. I had a part-time job working in a real estate office. So that was great experience throughout my university career in terms of just getting familiar with the corporate world a little bit. The guy who I worked for did a lot of foreclosures. So I was corresponding with lots of banks, lots of law offices. I had to go to court quite often. And so it was a great sort of formal training in terms of just even from an administrative standpoint, how to structure emails and all that kind of stuff. It was a great experience, great part-time job throughout university. I also stayed busy volunteering. I'm an avid basketball player, fan, coach, referee. And throughout my university career is actually when I was probably the most active, both playing recreationally, but then also coaching full-time at my old high school. So I ran the basketball program at Riverside Secondary throughout my university days. And then I did a lot of coaching through Basketball BC, which is the sort of provincial or club format that PC has. So coach club ball as well. And then I was actually a founding member and organizer for a nonprofit where we tutored at-risk immigrant youth out of the Burnaby Youth Hub, and that was in collaboration with Burnaby and a couple other organizations. So definitely kept really busy in university. I guess the one of the things that I really liked about university was the social aspect of it. One of the highlights of it, and my friends will still sort of razz me about it to this day. And I actually at my wedding, it was mentioned a couple of times in our wedding speech that I couldn't get in wedding speeches that I couldn't get from one side of the university to the other without stopping about 10 times to say hi to somebody. So really enjoyed the social aspect. Would encourage you guys, obviously, be social, kind of speak up in your tutorials and stuff like that. Some of the friendships that I made in tutorials are lifelong friendships now. But in addition to that, I guess on the other side of it, there are obviously things that you wish you would have done differently. And I kept pretty busy throughout university, so I'll cut myself some slack. But Definitely wish I would have gotten involved with some more programs at SFU. Just sort of the social aspect was great with being part of a community on campus, right? My friends who played for sports teams, or even people who were more involved with their departments, right? Like get involved with econ, get involved with sort of the case competitions, whatever it might be. Just that's one thing that I wish I would have done more, is build a sort of community related to SFU. I had a lot of friends that would do remote travel during SFU, so they would take semesters abroad. So yeah, that's the only other thing that I would have done. But looking back, I kept really busy, and something that me and Azim were talking about was all of these things, right? Whether it's volunteering or sports or your part-time job or university, throughout the entire sort of experience, I always make sure to keep this lens of networking. And that's just something that came naturally to me, was relationship building, trust building, that kind of thing. And that is something that, I always tell people when they talk about, oh, well, why should I go to university? Or, the stuff I learned at university, when am I ever going to use calculus in the real world, right? But I'll always say to them that it's the soft benefits that you gain in university that actually help you out long term, and the untangible benefits, things like bettering your social skills, things like networking, right, making friends, making relationships, things like time management, things like even just sort of operating within a system, yeah, right, like that's something that I think university really gets you prepared for in the real world. Is university is basically like a society in and of itself, right? SFU is, a little mini Canada, let's call it. And there are rules and there are ways to be successful, and there are penalties for not being successful. And there are ways that, you're held accountable. And that's one of the things that I really enjoyed at university, and learning that system, but also learning how to make that system work for you, right? Knowing where to spend your time, knowing that, okay, if I sit down and I take notes during lecture, I don't have to do as much reading to sort of go back and study the material. So, little things like that, I think, were really helpful in terms of, like time management, and just sort of understanding how to be successful. I think was really helpful at university. And I still use a lot of those things in my career today. So we'll talk a bit about my career path, right? Like my first job at a university, it was sort of just naturally happened. It was for a local air conditioning company that was a pretty big company, over 100 employees. They're one of the major players in the market. They're a HVAC company, so heating, ventilation, air conditioning. They needed some help with just modernization, so I helped them with their website. I did some inside sales for them, but ultimately, it wasn't my passion. It wasn't what I was really looking for. It was just something convenient that kind of fell into my lap, and I was happy to have a job at a university. So did that for a couple of years, but then soon learned that my desire was to be more sort of ingrained in the corporate world. And when you hear about corporate world and you hear about business development, right, which was sort of the path that I was on, it was either going to be marketing or business development. And I realized that you make a lot more money in business development and sales than you do in marketing. And so I wanted to continue down that path of business development, and really the best place to get experience in sales or in business in general is one of these big box Fortune 500 companies like Xerox. Xerox, I don't know if you guys know, but obviously they have their photocopiers, but they're also a technology company. They're the inventors of the modern day user interface, right? The way that the mouse works was also technology that was founded by Xerox. So they're a technology company, but they had also been established so long as sort of this corporate figure in the US, right? Everybody has heard of Xerox in the US. And so just the way that they do their training, and the way that their company is structured, and the way that they interact with customers, and the sort of educational style of interacting with customers was the best training that I could ever ask. People call Xerox an MBA in sales, basically. And for me, particularly, I was working in the downtown core. And so it really gave me great exposure to all these different types of businesses. And like I said, right, with Xerox, one of the great benefits of working for them was that they really try to, get you to understand a business before you talk to them about their needs. And so, I got to really understand the legal industry, the finance industry, the mining industry, right, which are all huge industries in BC. So the experience in and of itself was worthy of my time at Xerox. And a couple months into working at a couple of years into working at Xerox, it's not an easy place to work. That's the other part of it. It is very high paced. It is very high pressure. And so once you're there for a couple of years, you start to get recruited pretty heavily. And that's one thing that I noticed in my first few jobs was that 2-year mark was kind of like this. And previously, right, like when we were growing up, like I think that was something that was kind of frowned upon a little bit, was these short tenures that new grads were having when they're entering the workforce. And I see how that can be looked at as a negative thing, but also as a positive thing, because you're gaining lots of experience. Companies are wanting to leverage your experience with other organizations as well. 2 years isn't exactly a very short stint, right? Like if it was 6 months, 6 months, 6 months, right? Then that kind of raises a bit of a red flag. But I think that employers nowadays are starting to realize that, young people are a lot more flexible with their career paths. And so I think a 2-year stint at a university isn't necessarily a short stint or anything to raise flags. And that's how long I worked for the air conditioning company. That's how long I worked for Xerox. And then, after my 2 years at Xerox, started to get pretty heavily recruited on LinkedIn, actually. And so I started looking around and looking for new opportunities, and came across a company that I had been sort of watching for a really long time. It's a company called Hootsuite. I don't know if you guys have heard of them. I think, were just founded. They're founded while I was in university, and so there's a lot of buzz about them. They are a social media startup in Vancouver. Applied for them a bunch of times throughout my career in the first 2 jobs, and never made it through. And then it was in fact a friend of mine who was what I saw was mutual friends with the person who was hiring for the role at Hootsuite. And she and I had played intramural co-ed basketball together at SFU. And so we had a great relationship. And so I messaged her on Facebook. I said, hey, I see that you're connected with so-and-so who's hiring for this job. Do you mind putting in a good word? And it turned out to be one of her really good friends. So she put in a good word. I got the interview, and the rest is history. So that's sort of like the beginning of I would characterize these 3 jobs. Each of them ended up ultimately being about a 2-year stint at each position. I would consider this sort of the beginning of my career, right? Sort of trying to figure it out, trying new things, seeing where I want to be long term, what I liked about these 3 companies, what I didn't like about these 3 companies, right? And then similar thing happened at Hootsuite, where I was there for a couple of years, and I started to get recruited. And I was getting recruited by these different software companies and different similar companies who had similar offerings, right? All the big names in Vancouver, the software industry, right? So SAP, Salesforce, those kind of guys. But you know what? Having learned from this experience, I realized that it wasn't really getting me too excited. And it wasn't until I received a call from a recruiter who was recruiting for the job with ChargePoint that I started to get interested. And it was because it wasn't just a regular software sale. It was something that was a bit more different, right, and a bit more unique, and definitely in a very much of an upstart industry. And so I took the plunge, got into the EV charging world, and it's been a great ride. It's been a long journey. So I've been working for ChargePoint for over 5 years now. From the time that I've been there, we went from about 200 employees to about 1,500 employees now. I was employee number 2 in all of Canada. The person who's hired before me has been off on maternity leave. So I was basically at this point, I'm the longest tenured Canadian employee. We have about 20 now, 5 of which report to me, as I was promoted recently to the country manager position, given sort of my experience in this space and the sort of the success that we've had here in the British Columbia market. So, this means that, there's a lot more responsibilities for me. I'm constantly in speaking engagements. In fact, this afternoon, I'm headed to another one in Vancouver. But it's been a great experience. It's a great position, and it's more than anything, it's a great industry to be in. And so I'll talk a bit about the industry at this point. This electrification that's happening, right? Like, you guys all see it from a peripheral, I'm sure, right? Whether it's the video, whether it's the actual vehicles in the streets, or whether it's the news, or you hear about these rebates and stuff, right? Ultimately, right, this is going to be the biggest major change really in our lives that we're going to see in terms of technology. The smartphone and the mobile revolution has happened. The sort of Uber, Airbnb, TNCs, like, owning something but not owning it, revolution has happened. And now it's going to be the transportation revolution, and it's moving towards electric. You hear things about autonomous, and you hear things about people going to a purely rideshare world, right? Which that could very well happen within our lifetime. What's definitely going to happen in the near-term future is this idea of electrification. And the reason why it's happening so fast, especially, and the reason why it's happening faster in some markets than others, is because of this convergence that's happening between government support, the actual vehicles being available themselves, and then, of course, drivers, right, consumers wanting to actually buy the cars. Not all three of these things were not all present at the same time until now, right? For a while, it was the automakers who were dragging their heels, right? Not wanting to give up their traditional business, right? Like, this is General Motors, right? This is Bavarian Motor Works. This is Ford Motors. Their whole business is built off of motors. Now it's batteries, right? It's an entirely different drivetrain. And so they were dragging their heels for a while, but now again, you guys have seen it. I think it was like 60% of Super Bowl commercials this year were for electric vehicles. Manufacturers are fully bought in, right? And then the last piece of consumers, right? I don't know how many of you have driven in an electric vehicle or driven one yourselves, but the experience of driving an electric vehicle is just way more elevated. It's quieter, it's a more reactive drivetrain, so it brakes faster, accelerates faster. Obviously, the cost savings are very significant, including, especially given today's price of gas. And so people want to buy electric. And so with all this convergence happening, we're seeing just these staggering numbers that are showing that this is happening right now. British Columbia, actually, this is dated. I just got the most recent statistics. And in the entire province of BC, the average percentage of sales of vehicles being electric is about 17%, which is very significant. In California, right? Like, when everybody thinks about EV, they think California because that's where Tesla's located. California had just over 16%. So we're actually the highest province or state in North America in terms of quarter-over-quarter electric vehicle sales. Anytime I talk to my friends who work for Tesla HQ, they'll tell me that any outside of California, Vancouver is their number one market. Anytime they come to Vancouver, that's the most they ever see Teslas. It's just a very, very highly concentrated area that is very sort of supportive of electric. So it's happening very fast. I mean, it's kind of undeniable at this point. I think most of you would say that you're thinking of buying an electric vehicle, or if you had the choice, that you would entertain purchasing an electric vehicle. And to top it all off, whether you want to or not, as of 2035, the provincial government is no longer going to permit the sale of non-electric or plug-in hybrid vehicles. The current sort of penalty that they've indicated for non-compliance is $1 million per vehicle. So if a manufacturer sells a non-electric vehicle in 2035, they're going to be fined $1 million. So it's significant, right? Like 2035, that's not that far away, you guys. You'll be where I am in 2035. which is crazy to think about because I'm still relatively early in my career, but in 10 years, it's going to be an entirely different world. So it's very interesting, very fast moving. That's sort of the point I wanted to get across. And then we can get into a little bit of education if unless there's any questions or any reason that I should hold up for now.
Yeah, thank you, David. This is, I mean, a lot of information in a very short period of time, very well put together. I have a couple of questions, and I'm going to start it off because I know other people here have a lot of good questions. First of all, you started off going into the air conditioning industry.
That's right.
So a lot of our grads, like you were 10 years ago,
Yes,
couldn't define the skills needed for that first job. So this is
sure.
what most of our undergrads and you question. Okay, what skills do I have that's going to give me a chance to work in a job? So if you could walk us through the skills you had going to the air conditioning job and what you actually did, right? Because nobody knows even, how to describe a job. And then those skills that were learned and how you transferred those to Xerox and so forth.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. No, it's always just such a conundrum, right? It's always so tough. What's first job out of university? What am I going to do, right? And that's why I kind of emphasize the fact that it's like, you can do it for a couple of years and switch to something else. It's not the end of the world, right? Just because I know that's always such a high pressure decision to make, and it's also something that's really difficult, right? Like I applied for 100 jobs, right, and got rejected because I had no experience because I was just coming out of university. So this was, again, another benefit of having done some networking, right? This was somebody who I coached at Riverside, and his daughter went to Riverside and said, okay, once you're done university, let me know and I'll, you can apply for a job, that kind of thing. So it was very much networking based. But in general, I'll answer your question, Azam, but really, like, it's to some extent, you kind of got to get whatever you can at that point. And that's why, it did end up being a temporary job for me because, it was something that was available. It was right there. I jumped on it, and it was a great learning experience. To your point, I got to hone a lot of skills. Was it what I was looking for coming out of university? Absolutely not. But it was what was available to me. And it was a great learning experience, just like every single one of these positions have been. And so I welcomed that opportunity. It was difficult. It was a small, medium business, right? So that's a whole different world than working for a big corporate company with all this structure and training and knowledge and coaching and stuff, right? With smaller businesses, you're kind of left to your own devices. And I'm very well suited to do that now, but at the time, being my first job at university, it was a little bit difficult, but that, to your point, around having built some skills, right? It helped me become more autonomous and helped me be a bit more self-directed in terms of how I was spending my time. And that's something that I've seen become a huge, like a very like common thing nowadays, is autonomy and letting employees sort of, just deliver your deliverable at the end of the day. And that's all that matters, right? I don't care how you do it. I don't care what hours it's at, especially with people working from home. That was definitely a skill that I think I developed while working at that company. And then, again, the fact that it was a small, medium business, I kind of touched a lot of stuff. And so I got to touch some SEO and some website management and Google ads and that kind of stuff. And so that marketing experience was definitely helpful, and I still carry that over to this day. So definitely those are some skills that I helped build working in that first company. But in terms of what helped me get the job, I think outside of any sort of social connection, it would have been my sort of just my familiarity with technology and my comfort level with technology, and knowing that I'd be able to help them with their website and help them write copy and that kind of stuff. I think definitely my writing and my technology acumen helped me with that first job for sure.
And was it a lot of sales? Were you on the phone a lot? you know, and those skill sets that you had, did you have them before you entered the job, or did you learn it on the job?
I learned them on the job, to be honest. Yeah, that sort of that adaptability, that independence, right? The self motivation, all that kind of stuff was, and it didn't, and it didn't happen right away. And obviously, you still, that it's still something that I have to be very strategic about on the other side now, because I'm so inundated and I have to know where to pick my time, because I can pick my time anywhere. At that time it was difficult, just just finding, what can I do to help develop this business. It wasn't very sales based role. There was a lot more project management and web page management and that kind of stuff, more marketing involved. The pure sales really started up at Xerox. There was some inside sales and some outside sales actually as well as part of this position. But most of what I did, like I said, right, like it's a small medium business, so you kind of have to have your hands in everything. It's kind of like a startup, and so it was definitely many hats. But yeah, not as sales focused as it started to get in my subsequent positions for sure.
Perfect. And so moving on to Xerox and to Hootsuite, what skill
Sure.
bases do you think you carried along that allowed you to get that job at, say, Xerox and then Hootsuite? And then I'll open
Sure.
it up to other people, but I've got specific
For
questions about
sure.
ChargePoint as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, of course. No, Xerox was, that one was very much a like, I I I think that was more so meant for people straight out of university. Not necessarily, but like there were a few people who were straight out of university. I think for the most part, they tried to have some sort of experience before, they wanted you to have some sort of experience before coming and work for the company. And so that definitely helped. But yeah, once I got to the job, being familiar with just like simple stuff that at the time I think it was also a little bit emergent. Like this is at a time where we still didn't have online classes. I think it was my last year that they started coming out with online classes. Like we still had to submit everything in hard copy, like not all this digital, like they would just come out with the first few versions of digital textbooks, right? So it was a bit of a bit of a different world. So getting that familiarity, and this was actually a big benefit of my part-time job as well, working for that real estate office throughout university, right? Like I worked at Future Shop before that, Best Buy, I guess you could call it, and that obviously doesn't really help you in your real world, right? And so working for that administrative job essentially, while I was in university, and then sort of leveraging that to get to the air conditioning company, and then while I was at the air conditioning company, doing all those emails, and yes, there were some sales calls involved, or even if it's stuff like call existing customers and try and get them to put on a planned maintenance program or something like that. Those interactions and those, like, just like you'd be so surprised. Like I could probably show you 10 emails in my inbox from today alone, really poorly written emails. And so even just those small intangible skills, building those at that first company, and getting that sort of like exposure to just sitting behind a computer all day every day, was definitely helpful, to help me get the job at Xerox. Once at Xerox, it was an absolute whirlwind. It was fast, super fast paced. We probably had, it was 4 years of experience in 2 years, and it really just helped you challenge yourself and learn how to deal with, when you're faced with a difficult situation of not wanting, of having to do something you don't want to do, essentially, right? Of pushing your levels, and pushing your comfort levels, and pushing your boundaries in terms of comfort, right? Like, yes, university kind of pushes you in that extent, right? But it's stuff that, it's studying, it's writing tests, it's writing essays, it's submitting projects, right? When it comes to outside sales, right, you're knocking on doors, right? You're picking up the phone and someone might not be having a good day on the other end. And so it's a lot of the times, it's stuff that you don't want to sort of put yourself out there and be vulnerable for. However, it helps you realize that it's just business. Ultimately, at the end of the day, don't take anything personally. What you're doing isn't wrong or bad or anything that you're, trying to do out of line. You're just trying to help a customer. And so once I think that really helped me from the Xerox point onwards, because I saw both sides, right? I saw a lot of people who were just trying to hit their numbers, who didn't really care about their customer, what was best for the customer. I saw people who, were a little bit too methodical, and it resulted in not performing as well, right? And so I was able to sort of find that middle ground where it's like, okay, how can I still be helpful, right? But also generate business. And so that's where I've really sort of developed my sales mantra, or my business development mantras, around selling with noble purpose, which is this concept in sales that was born out of the pharmaceutical industry, actually, where if you pin your motivation to the greater benefit that what you're proposing, or what solution you bring to the table, right? Like for sustainability, for example, if you focused on that, especially when it comes to motivating teams, it becomes a lot more valuable than just something like money or a trip or something like that. Once you have this intrinsic motivation, or this noble purpose, it really helps you sort of, like I said, right, not take it all too personal, find the motivation, continue to get motivated, that sort of thing. And so definitely helped develop that throughout Xerox. So my whole sort of business development, sales development mantra, but then also my business acumen, I think, was a big thing that Xerox helped with. Like I said, right, I was working with every single business in downtown Vancouver, right, the downtown core. And so I got to learn a lot about different businesses and how businesses run, and that was very, very helpful for me. And that definitely helped me leverage that experience to my job at Hootsuite, where I kind of came in a lot more confident now, knowing that I understand what a sales process is like, knowing that I understand what type of questions I need to ask a customer to make sure that I'm connecting them with either the right person or the right product. And so that really helped me set myself up for success. Like at that point, a lot of the stuff that we had to learn that was ingrained in us at Xerox just became muscle memory when I got to Hootsuite. And so that obviously then helped me propel into my current position within ChargePoint.
Thanks very much. I'm going to let other people ask some questions if they have it.
Please, yeah, if anybody has any.
Yeah. And you can just unmic yourself.
Yeah.
So
if not, I have a couple of slides on some 101 around EV charging, but we can talk about my career at ChargePoint first before that has them.
Yeah,
sure.
And so I also have, and you could go ahead with that, but I have about 6 or 7 people who couldn't make it because they had a tutorial in a class, and they sent me some questions. Actually,
Sure.
quite a few questions,
Sure.
and I'll get to that later. But can I get to one in particular that everyone seems to? There's a theme here. In terms of your LinkedIn profile, how important is that, and how important is it to keep up with that? So I'm sort of paraphrasing a whole bunch of similar questions into one.
No, great question. It is important, actually, and I'm glad that question was asked, because I probably, because I mentioned it, right? But that is, LinkedIn is what led to really after Xerox. That was what helped me get my next 2 jobs was LinkedIn. And it was because, again, right, this is early days. And so LinkedIn was the holy grail to any recruiter at that time. Think about it. When in history had they ever had every single applicant in the same place, right? But being active on it wasn't it was just I made sure my profile was fully filled out. I would go on, I'd go and I'd like stuff every now and then, right? I'm sure it's the same thing that you guys do. Once the red bubbles are gone from Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok, I guess now, then you kind of moved on to LinkedIn if you have to, right? So I sort of did a little bit of that, but in terms of actually producing content, I do that now because I'm in this sort of position of thought leadership where people are looking to me for valuable content, and that was always what you always have to make sure that anytime you produce any content, and this is outside of LinkedIn, this is really anywhere, like even if you're sending somebody an email, like you have to make sure that there's something of value in it for the person, right? And so posting, doing different posts and making sure that they're valuable and helpful and educational and stuff like that is great. And I try and do it with a bit more of a cadence now, but the biggest benefit for me was just being on there, and then having my work experience on there and accurate and updated, right? Like I go in, I heard a rule of thumb that every week that you should spend an hour looking at other jobs, no matter what your career is, no matter when you're looking to move, no matter how you're happy, if you're happy or not happy at your job. You spend half an hour to an hour every single week looking at other options and other jobs. That's what I think the biggest benefit for LinkedIn is being able to see all the jobs that are out there, right? And not necessarily applying through LinkedIn. I never really applied for jobs on LinkedIn. I would use LinkedIn to find who is the decision maker or the person who's posting the job, right? And then looking at my mutual contacts with them and then seeing if I know anybody that can introduce me, that kind of thing. I definitely did that more frequently. And then just being on LinkedIn, being present and having a professional looking page, obviously with, you follow the guidelines around your headshot and your backdrop and your descriptions and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I guess it made me an attractive candidate for recruiters to reach out to. So that was definitely the biggest benefit for me for LinkedIn.
Thank you, David. Sorry for spending so much time on that.
It's fine. No, it's important.
But I'll let you go on to that. But just a quick follow up. There's quite a number of questions here.
Sure.
Just linked to LinkedIn. Sorry, excuse the pun. Is there any other social media platform now that's emerging that people here especially should be aware of, that you're starting to notice that maybe you're recruiting for, because you're also, ChargePoint is an American company. There's just some trends that are being sort of forwarded by your American.
Interesting. Yeah,
office.
I haven't.
I thought that was a very interesting question from one of our students.
There is a couple things. I mean, well, I don't know why this came into mind, and it's very annoying, but Doodle came into mind, the Doodle polls that you see all the time. I mean, I wouldn't exactly classify it as social media. But I've had a couple people approach me with lead exchange programs. There's more and more of these like lead exchange programs. I mean, as you can imagine, in professional sales, a hard part of the job is just finding the contact info for the people to reach out to. And in fact, there's a lot of limitations around how and when you can reach out to people unsolicited, with the various governance rules in BC. And so I think people are finding these platforms where I'll load up 10 business cards, and then that gives you access to like 10 other business cards. So like it's like sort of a lead exchange thing. I don't really participate in them, but outside of that, I mean, I can't really think of any new programs or any new software that I've seen. No, nothing in particular. No.
Thanks very much.
Sure. I mean, I do. I mean, TikTok, I've heard, is like overtaking everything. I'm out of touch with TikTok, but it sounds like that's where people are going to start targeting ads, and that's going to take over for Facebook as the go-to, I think, for corporate advertising on social media.
Wow, that's good to know. I'll let you spend some time on the EV space and.
Sure. Yeah, and if anybody thinks of any questions while I'm going through, then by all means feel free. But yeah, I just want to do a bit of education so that you guys understand the space a little bit more. I mean, obviously, if you want to pursue a career in EV, and the industry is just absolutely ballooning, and so the sooner you know these kind of things, the better you might be able to be eligible for a position within the industry. And feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I can help with that if you guys are applying for a job or have any questions or anything like that. But let's just start off with like some really high level information for those of you who aren't electric vehicle drivers, to sort of just get the mindset of an EV driver. And the mindset, the first thing that you can think about, and this is obviously the most important thing as it relates to my business, right, is the refueling process of the vehicle, right? And we can still consider it fuel, right? Like electricity is still fuel, just like propane is fuel, just like compressed natural gas is a fuel, right? Oil is a fuel and gas is a fuel. So you're still refueling, but the issue is that with traditional gas, you're making a specific stop to get gas, right? Like you're waiting until the red light turns on, right? Because none of us want to pay for gas before we have to. And then you're late for your lecture, obviously, and you're low on gas, and who knows if it's going to make it up the hill all the way up Gulhardy, and you don't get paid till tomorrow, so it's going to have to, and then you're just going to coast down to neutral, right? Like it's just a much more inefficient and sort of, annoying process to stop, go somewhere, find a gas station, which they're becoming less and less of, find them in a specific location, and then going there for that destination just to refuel and then leave. It's just not convenient. What we've done, what electric vehicle offers you, is the convenience of charging while you're parking. So you're parked anyways, right? Like you're already in the stall, and the big difference now becomes the availability of your fuel, right? You look at gas and oil, and they're like I don't know if you guys have ever seen a gas station in development, but it takes them a year to even prepare the soil to be able to put a gas station on top. And after the gas station is gone, that's a huge other process that to try and get the environmental aspects of the property back up to grade. So it's a very volatile fuel. It's very hard to transport, and it's only able to be stored in very specific locations. Electricity is the opposite, right? You look at a view of planet Earth from outer space, and you see lights everywhere. And so that's going to be the big thing that makes it super easy and a no-brainer for people to drive electric, is that the fuel is available everywhere. It's a much more reliable source of fuel. The price isn't going to be as volatile and dependent on other external factors like politics and whatever, right? Like we're not going to have to pay for that at the pump anymore. We just pay our utility rate. It's the same price of electricity as it is for everything else. And you're getting to charge while you park, right? The question people always ask me, okay, well, how long is it going to take me to charge from zero? How long is it going to take me to charge from empty? Well, the thing is you're not actually going to be driving from empty. You're going to be waking up every morning with the full tank if you have a charger at your home, right? You're gonna have a full battery every morning. And so what's happening when people are coming to SFU and parking at West Mall is they plug in, but it's not to fill their vehicle from zero. It's to top up what we consider an average daily commute, right? So every day you drive a certain amount, and then when you get to where you need to go, you want to get your range back, right? It's the same thing as a cell phone. No one's going to wait until the end of the night that your cell phone's at 0% to say, okay, now I'll charge, right? Like you'd be insane. You'd have anxiety. You'd be stressed out. Like my thing sends me that 20%, message, and I'm freaking out trying to find a charger, right? You top up as you go. You plug in while you're at your desk. You plug in while you're driving. You're continuing to top up. Same thing with electric vehicles. You're not waiting until it's zero. You're topping up as you go. Now, if you're on a road trip, right, if you're going to, Kelowna or something like that, you might have to stop in Merritt to do a fast charge. That's when fast charging works, right? Because you only have a few hundred kilometers of range in your battery. So the same way that you're not going to get there in one shot on a fuel vehicle, or on a gas vehicle, you're not going to get there on one shot on an EV either. So in those scenarios, yes, you'll have to stop. But for the most part, on a day-to-day basis, people aren't having to actually stop and think about charging. It's just happening naturally, which is great. The analogy that we use is a bee, right? Going from flower to flower and pollinating is the vehicle going from charger to charger and topping off. Or the other analogy is a lily pad, right? Frogs hop from lily pad to lily pad. Same thing as EV drivers. They hop from charger to charger. And that's why we really made this our solution as a company, right? Like we're based out of Silicon Valley. And I guess going back from a career standpoint, one of the things that really helped me with getting my job at ChargePoint, 5+ years ago, was the fact that I had this tech sort of software background. And we're very much a software-based solution, very much an app-based solution. We have about a 75% market share across North America of public charging. And a big part of that is because we make it a really good user experience. So, next time you guys are in West Mall, go buy one of the chargers. It's very easy to use. You can flip around. You see it has an LCD screen on it. And then to actually use the chargers is very easy as well through the app, where you can just Apple Wallet, you can tap, you can use your Apple Watch. Very, very easy to use. And then the actual management of the stations as well requires software. So David Agosti, for example, your director of parking, he has access to the software of the ChargePoint system. And so that's how he's able to run reports and change the fees. And he can make a whitelist group that say, okay, only econ students are allowed to use these chargers, right? Or whatever you want to do. And so, we've used that sort of Silicon Valley idea of, software and everything to help our product stand out, make it future proof and make it so that you can tweak it for any location that you need charging at, whether it's at your home or at a workplace or at a retail location, or whether it's, it is that fast charging on the corridor in Merritt or something like that. We have a solution for any sort of EV charging application. So that's a bit about our company. Lots of really exciting stuff happening, obviously very exciting space. So please let me know if you guys have any questions. If you can't think of them right now, happy to follow up afterwards offline as well.
So anyone have a question? They can unmic.
Yeah, or you can put it in the chat, up to you, but.
I have a list of questions from students. So what happened today was that this 10 o'clock spot for a lot of people just wasn't working.
I
so
know.
I had which is fine. Oh,
it.
not a problem. But I have a whole bunch of students who just said,
no, it's great. You have the recording.
Don't forget to ask them this question. I know these guys
Sure.
they'll kill me if I don't ask them.
Okay,
One is
great. No, I love it.
how do I get into this market? And are you are you looking for people?
Am I hiring?
Yeah.
So not right now, especially nothing junior right now, right? For the next couple of years, I think we're at such a fast pace that I don't even think that we'd be able to start anybody up. But I mean, it remains to be seen. Follow me on LinkedIn. I post anytime that we're hiring in Canada. I post a lot of jobs that my colleagues are like partners are posting as well. So even if it's not necessarily a ChargePoint position, it could be one of my partners, right? We're actually a distribution sales network. So we don't actually do any of the sales ourselves. So I'm not, doing hand-to-hand combat or getting customers to sign POs. It's my partners who do that. And then I just support them and answer questions and help them with their customers and do presentations like this. So there's definitely lots of opportunities with my partners. I would say, just the regular sort of traditional methods of looking for jobs, LinkedIn, Kijiji, whatever you guys use. And then another good source would be if it's specific to EV charging, there are a few nonprofit organizations that are focused around education. So there's Plugin BC, which is sort of an educational organization through the province. I don't know if they have internships or volunteer positions, but there's Plugin BC, there's eMotive, which does a bit of the same thing. And then there's Plug-in Drive, which is based out east. But those sort of and then there's also the Vancouver Electric Vehicle Association called Viva. So those are a few entities that, if you guys are super passionate about EV charging, if you want to set yourself up so that once you graduate, you have an opportunity for, some preferential employment opportunities, right? Just given the fact that you have some experience in this space. That's one of the things that has really helped me be successful. It was just being right place, right time. This industry is barely even 5 years old. So for me to have 5 years experience and it really puts me aside. But for people who are trying to enter the market, really any experience that you can have is going to be helpful. Maybe as a future state goal would be for us to set up some sort of an internship program or something. Hey.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah,
Know that I'm going to bug you about that. You shouldn't have said
yeah,
that.
I shouldn't have said it. No, I would love to, actually. I would love to. I can start. Yeah, let's follow that up for sure. I don't know what the process would be on our end, but definitely would be happy to do something like that. Yeah, in the meantime, sorry to not give you, like, I wish there was like a website or something I could give you, but those few nonprofit organizations, and then LinkedIn and whatever traditional means you use are great. And then if you do, like I said, just as always, if you do find a position and you want to apply for it, you see that I have a common connection or something with someone at the company or with the job poster, just reach out to me on LinkedIn and we can chat. Happy to help out.
For those who are here, I would jump on that. So I've got
Yeah.
I've got a bunch of questions here, David, and we don't have tons of time, so these are rapid fire. Your 10-year plan?
So I always wanted to end up doing something entrepreneurial. And I guess one thing that I wanted to make mention of was, like, to everybody on the call and to all the students and stuff, is like, you don't have to have it all crystal clear, right? Like my dream wasn't to be at an air conditioning job. My dream wasn't to be at Xerox, right? Even at ChargePoint, right? Like, I couldn't have told you 10 years ago that, this is where I'm going to be, right? So I would say something entrepreneurial, right? And that's enough, right? And so the thing that I'll tell you guys is, like, people always talk about, oh, you got to do what you love so it doesn't feel like you work a day in your life. Like, yes, that would be great, right? But even in a professional basketball player, which would be my thing my dream job, doesn't love doing it every single day. And so I think my goal in 10 years is to be doing something that I am passionate about, that I find enjoyment and fulfillment in. And that's all that we should really be pursuing, is finding something that you feel passionate about and that you find enjoyment and fulfillment in.
Related to, they're not even here, so I don't know how they figured this one out, but you said you had some tech skills, some soft tech skills. Yeah. What were they and what are they? Have you developed those?
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I know this is the econ alum, but the communications department actually was very helpful in that respect. We took oh gosh, I can't remember the exact name of the class, but it was out of SFU Surrey, and it was something digital transformation or something along those lines. And I just always it was just the one thing I realized is that just having like a baseline understanding of how technology and computers work really help you pick up a lot of other stuff along the way. I would say the stuff that I learned that was most valuable, yeah, I would say the marketing stuff was valuable. Understanding what SEO is, metadata, even though I didn't do a great job and it was just WordPress, right? Like, everybody should have experience building a website at some point in their life, right? If you're doing anything marketing, anything sales, anything business related, those types of, like, that's what marketing and sales is nowadays, is SEO and traffic and click through and customer acquisition. So I guess digital marketing would be my tech strength that really has helped me throughout my career.
What do students lack coming out of university these days that you would, you wish you could have addressed while you were a student? I'm paraphrasing a whole bunch.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Then what can they work on?
It's the same cliches that you hear on both ends, really. But like, that's the common sort of sentiment of, like, millennials feeling entitled and being soft and whatever they want to call it. Let's call it work ethic. That's the one thing, and not to make assumptions, right? But make a recommendation would be to make sure that your work ethic, if you could be above and beyond on everything, right? Like, it's hard to tell somebody that you have to work 60 hours a week, right? Especially in today's day of work-life balance. But if there's one thing that I would recommend fresh out of university, that is going to set you apart is to have a really good work ethic. And I still see it. I see a lot of young people who work remotely and are extremely productive. But I think the one common feedback would be that, there's a sense of entitlement and that the work ethic isn't there. So if you guys can kill those stereotypes, all the other stereotypes about millennials are great, right? How you use technology and how you can be productive and how you're creative and all that kind of stuff. So I would just say make sure to always watch out for that work ethic aspect, and then just being respectful, obviously, as well. But work ethic would probably be the big one.
So we are coming. This has been a very quick hour. So
it always is, eh?
Yeah, it is. We're coming to a close at 11 o'clock, but I'm going to leave it to our students for one last time to ask a question. Otherwise, I have one final question to ask you. Does anyone have anything?
I don't see anything in the chat.
You guys? Okay. So if there's one, it's just a tough question. If there's one thing that students should make sure that they leave this university with, because it's tough, right? Once you leave university, you're down the hill and you never go up the hill, and you're just like, I should have done that before I left. What would that be in your mind, David?
Yeah,
It's a tough
it's hard
question
to say one thing, but yeah, the thing that always comes back to for me was I wish I would have been a visiting student to another university, because I've never lived anywhere outside of Poco, basically. Well, in Vancouver, I lived in Vancouver for a while, but yeah, that's that. Especially talking to like a lot of my American colleagues, because there's so many more American like big cities in the U.S. and most people go to a different state to study. Like guys will have lived in 10 different cities, 20 different cities, and they're my age. And so that's the one thing that I guess I kind of regret is, there's a program where you can visit any other university, right, and still get credits for it, and it still counts towards your graduation. Talk to your advisor.
Yeah, absolutely.
They'll know the details on that.
Right.
But then there were also really cool ones like Prague and Australia and Belgium and all that kind of stuff. And so I guess that's one thing that I would recommend is if you can find an opportunity to travel while still going to university and working towards your degree, I would say absolutely take that opportunity.